Always a happy day at Salon when I get to talk to a big inspiration, brilliant New York Times bestselling author, Marc Lamont Hill. Today we're talking about his brand new book. You should definitely pre-order, hit the link, seen and unseen. Should be mandatory in classrooms, colleges across the country. Marc, thank you for coming on.
My brother, it is a pleasure. It's always good to see you. And your presence always brings out the best in me, man. So I'm grateful.
Thank you. I haven't seen you since we did the book event at Uncle Bobby's a couple of years ago, but I watched you on Black News Network a lot. While you were doing that, I just, when you first started, I was like, man, this is the commentary that we need. What's the next? Is it another move or?
Yeah, man, I got something coming up in a minute. I can't announce it yet, but
okay.
some good stuff is coming, man. We're gonna keep the momentum and the energy from Black News Channel, and we are going to basically try and replicate that someplace else, man,
okay.
Because like you said, we need a place to talk about Black issues every day. We need a place to talk about Black news every day. We need a place to talk about international stuff every day. We need a place to advocate. We need a place to talk about culture. So we're gonna do all that stuff on my next project, and I'm just gonna keep pushing forward.
No, you're the missing link, man. Nobody holds people accountable like you. Like we get caught up in this area with like just the nuance has just evaporated from mainstream conversations. So the fans they already know when Marc Lamont Hill step up to the plate. You better be ready. you better be ready.
Word. I'm gonna do my best. I'm gonna always do my best to press everybody, man, for good and in the best ways.
So let's get into this book. It's a beautiful cover, extremely powerful. Can you just start by just talking our viewers through just the title and why'd you decide to go with this design?
Yeah, man. The cover itself, in many ways, tells an important story, right? You see the cell phone capturing George Floyd, right? Darnella Frazier was the sister who was able to capture Derek Chauvin murdering George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And we all saw it. We were home. It was a pandemic. And we witnessed for over 9 minutes this execution. And it wasn't the first one.
Right.
And it wasn't the last one. But when we saw this one, everybody responded. The nation responded. People were in the streets. People were protesting. People were marching. People doing all kinds of stuff.
Fucking Mitt Romney at a Black Lives Matter rally. I'm like,
that's how you know. That's how you know. You got Mitt Romney up in the joint protesting, right? So if that's happening, the question is what led to it. And for me and Todd, I don't even know how to put it. The story of George Floyd and the fight for racial justice more broadly is bound up in social media, the hashtags we used, but the websites, the live streaming, all that stuff, and it's also bound up in the technology that captured it. And so we wanted to tell a story not just of these moments, the sister saying you about to lose your job, or a white man bringing an AR, to a rally and shooting people, talking about Kyle Rittenhouse, or a brother being killed in Minnesota. Like, we didn't just want to tell those stories, although they're important. We wanted to tell a deeper story about how technology and media play a role in how we fight for justice, how we tell those stories. And we wanted to show that it didn't just start now, because Ida B. Wells was doing it with the camera, with the photography, and talking about lynching. Dr. King was using broadcast news to show us marching on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and the beatings that we got were witnessed by white liberals who could no longer pretend that they didn't know. We were talking about Frederick Douglass. I mean, so we go through all of it as a way of showing the role that technology and media have always played.
So you talk about the role technology and media has played, which is extremely important. And one thing that technology and media has failed at, and plenty times, and as we follow these movements and we see these things happening, is the ability to be able to fully fully talk about who these victims were, right? So you do a deep dive in the George Floyd. It's like you go through everything from the basketball to the hooping to
you're gonna know George Floyd, yes, sir.
What were some of the things you learned about George Floyd, just in that research process?
There is a level of, and I had the luxury of asking people about George Floyd and learning about George Floyd also because of Stephen Jackson, my brother Stack, who loved him and was friends with him and who was able to help us understand stuff too, even before this book. But in doing the research, I learned that George Floyd was somebody whose life mirrored so many Black men in America. George Floyd, Candace Owens came out and said, George Floyd is no hero. He ain't gotta be a hero to live. He ain't gotta be a hero to not be murdered. But he was a martyr. And George Floyd was martyred, not because he stood up and said, he wasn't Dr. King or Malcolm X in the Autobahn saying, I'm gonna preach this message and be killed, but yet he still gave his life as a ransom for this racial justice project in America. Mm-hmm. And he was an unlikely martyr. He didn't know what he was going to do. This is a brother who played basketball. It's a brother who tried to rap, which I didn't know. This is a brother who, like many people, like Mike Brown, went to substandard schools, but still made the best out of them. This is a brother who got clean, got his life together, and struggled with substance abuse again, and got clean and struggled again. This is somebody who had encounters with the criminal legal system. All of these things are part of the journey of what it means to be vulnerable in this country. And I didn't realize just how vulnerable George Floyd had been throughout his life. I also learned a lot about his relationship with his children and how important that was to him. And in learning those things, for me, it made it even more important to not just tell his story, but to tell the story of Ahmaud Arbery, to tell the story of Kyle Rittenhouse, which one might not expect us to do in this book, to tell the story of George Floyd. Because all of those stories, I think, are key to understanding the fight for racial justice in this country.
It's one thing I hope and pray we can move past. You bring up Candace Owens, and a lot of times when these things happen,
you want to move past Candace Owens?
Yeah. when these things happen, I definitely want to move past Candace Owens. But when these things happen, people like Owens, who deserve the right to voice their opinions, right? We're all, supposed to be thinking people to share and trade ideas, disagree, or, whatever, right?
For sure.
But they have a tendency to put victims on trial. Like, why is it your place? Why is it your place to say if a person is a hero or not? So you don't know this man. You don't know his family. You don't know what he overcame. You don't know if he was in recovery and he inspired the person next to him to never touch a drug again. That is a hero in that person's perspective. So where do people, or why does that particular side so hungry to demonize anything Black, to try to suffocate any movement? Like, how do we get past that part?
Yeah, man. But it's not just white people, and it's not just conservatives. Think about when think about when Mike Brown was killed and everybody was marching. I remember once the video footage came out of him stealing the cigarillo, or the blunt from the store, people, a lot of middle class Black folks like, oh shit, man, we thought this was respectability, right? Exactly. And it's like, and think about how few Black women we've marched for. Think about how few not how few. We haven't even nationwide protests for any Black trans women, right? We haven't had any for any gay people, any openly, outwardly gay people. So there's a way that the Black community, you got to be a certain kind of hero, a certain kind of figure rather, to be memorialized or to be fought for. I mean, we positioned Rosa Parks instead of Claudette Colvin because she was a teen mom, right? So these conversations have been going on for a very long time. But you are right. What the right does ain't the same as what we do. I'm not trying to make equivalency here. I'm just saying none of us have been willing to openly advocate for all people, irrespective of how their Black lives show up. But what the right does is, and you're right about this, they demonize you in death to defend state violence. So they'll say Trayvon had weed in the system. Everybody got weed in their system, right?
Everybody.
I don't smoke, but like 99%, like 90% of people I know do, right? And I don't care, right? It doesn't mean they deserve to die, right? Trayvon Martin had a suspension in school. What that got to do? You think George Floyd knew that? And so when we go on and on and on looking at these different ways that we assassinate people's character after we've assassinated their bodies, it shows you a very concerted effort and a mission. And what Candace Owens said is, oh yeah, George Floyd shouldn't have died, but let's stop making a hero out of him. White people don't make heroes out of their people. We didn't make a hero out of Dylann Roof. And so now she's comparing Dylann Roof, who goes into a church and massacres innocent Black saints, with
no, she's the worst, dog. Like,
George Floyd. So I mean, I passionately disagree with her on this because it's a very dangerous game we play to say that you have to, because it's not just how we memorialize people in death. It speaks to something deeper, and this is what it speaks to. It speaks to the way that in life we don't actually believe that the poor, the drug addicted, the mentally ill, the unhoused, that they deserve what we give them. That's the problem.
So we never had a nationwide march for a trans victim. We never had a nationwide movement behind someone from the LGBTQ community, right? And it makes me want to, and just going back to the book. Are these cell phone videos making a difference, or is it solely based on what goes viral and what doesn't go viral? And did you ever think about the recipe for virality and like what is that? Like, how do we pick and choose which case actually explodes?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. Sometimes it's the timing, but oftentimes, and by timing, I mean, the pandemic put us in a place where we were all home. We were all attached to our phones even more than we already were. We all had the opportunity to galvanize around something, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know if the Breonna Taylor campaign picks up as much steam if all these other things weren't going on in the world, although it should have, right? We should have been talking about Breonna Taylor from day one.
Absolutely.
I think that some of it is the gruesomeness of it. Unfortunately, we live in a country where Black death is normal. So it can't just be ordinary Black. It can't just be, oh, this guy got killed. Some of it is that it has to fit a certain kind of narrative, right? That's why the brother in West Philly, who had a knife that got killed October of 2020, that story didn't make, because like, well, he had a knife. It's better if we have a story where somebody doesn't have a knife, right? Even though he shouldn't have been killed either. Some of it is the sheer gruesomeness of it, right? When Emmett Till is killed in August of 1955, his head is 3 or 4 times the normal size. Mm-hmm. And his mother has an open casket funeral using media and technology. Think about it, right? The camera to show it, Jet Magazine to cover journalism, mm-hmm. media, mm-hmm. To expose it so that the world could see what they did to her boy. That's a tactic that works because even the average person who doesn't give a damn about Black death, when you saw that boy's face, you said, "Oh shit, something's going on." Similarly, with Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd, it had the power of a still photo, similar to what happened to Emmett Till, because you're just staring at it. Mm-hmm. But it was a video. It lasted over 9 minutes. So for 9 minutes, America had to watch an execution. They had to watch a lynching. And so white people, they couldn't pretend to be innocent. They couldn't pretend not to know. They couldn't say, well, what did he do to the officer? They couldn't say anything. They had to watch 9 minutes of a murder. And that its virality was tied, I think, to the gruesomeness of it and the inescapability of the moral outrage. You had to be, if you gave a damn about Black people or human beings at all, you couldn't watch that video and be okay with it. You know, you can make a case for Mike Brown if you think black people are super magical, angry Negroes that walk through bullets, which is basically what Darren Wilson said in his grand jury testimony. You could come up with Freddie Gray and say, well, Freddie Gray, you know, he was wild and doing this and doing this and doing this, and you know, you could say, well, Sandra Bland didn't do anything the police didn't do anything to Sandra Bland. She killed herself, and that was unavoidable. And you could tell these kinds of stories, but you can't say shit about George Floyd. And so that story makes sense. Tamir Rice, 13, you know, the youth gave us the outrage, you know, although some people said, yeah, but he had that gun, he had that toy gun. So for me, the virality of stories is tied to what touches our sensibilities. The tough part is the thing that touches our sensibilities the most oftentimes isn't the most morally outrageous, but the thing that corresponds to our own biases. So a missing white woman, no matter why she's missing, how she's missing, is going to be on every news channel. Why? Because she's a missing white woman in a country that worships white women.
And nobody's going to get on the news and be like, yeah, but you know, she had weed in her system.
Exactly. Exactly.
You know, one thing I always just appreciated about you and your writings and your commentary is you don't hold back. You listen to the other side, and you always present points like at the highest level, right? Like I always, like when thinking of media, I always see you as like our last real truth teller. How difficult is that? How difficult is that? What kind of feedback you get for that?
You know, I mean, the beauty is that there are other truth tellers and so many powerful voices out there who are speaking the truth to power. And so I always feel good about the platforms that I'm occupying, the spaces that I'm occupying, because I'm sharing them with brothers like you who tell the truth. You know, I'm sharing them with courageous voices, particularly Black women who have emerged in the last few years as leaders of our movement. I'm grateful for that. You know what I'm saying? So I never take that for granted. Just that's first. Sometimes when I was, you know, in corporate media more, I definitely felt sometimes like it wasn't too many of us. And I felt like sometimes I was saying the thing that people didn't want to say. And sometimes, bro, it's the thing that people don't want to hear, even our people. So I'm anti-death penalty. So when I stand up and say, well, yeah, I don't support the death penalty, even for Dylan Roof, you know, Black people don't want to hear that. And I get why. He killed a whole bunch of us. But I got to keep a moral consistency, not because I give a damn about Dylan Roof, but because I care about the thousands of Black people who are going to be killed under the pretext of justice.
But isn't that the problem with the conversation around abolition too? It's like, if we talk about abolition and you would it, and then someone like Derek Chauvin gets sentenced to go to prison, this is celebration time. Right. Should it be celebration time? And why can't we see that for every Derek Chauvin that's incarcerated, you can probably pay that to about 5,000 Black people?
that is what you just said is fundamentally the problem. Fundamentally the problem. We are challenged to get any kind of justice and democracy in this country. It just ain't there. So as an abolitionist, I say, well, this system can't give us justice. Policing isn't the answer. Prisons ain't the answer. And we're the ones catching hell for all of it. But then, like you said, George Floyd gets killed and people are marching the streets, right? Lock them up. I get why. Indict, convict, send them killer cops to jail. This whole damn system is crooked as hell. We cheering this stuff in the street. I don't do that. But I understand why people do it. I understand the impulse to do it. Mm-hmm. And so part of what we have to do as abolitionists, one is not be condescending and be like, y'all calling for prison. Somebody killed that woman's baby. Mm-hmm. And we don't have any mechanism of accountability and justice right now, except that prison in a lot of people's minds. So you damn right. If the police kill my child, I have every right to say, you know what, I want that cop in jail because that's all we got. But my job as abolitionist is to, one, fight for something different and fight and build something different, and to convince people that another option is possible. So I don't fight. You don't ever hear me on the street. When Freddie Gray was killed, people were saying they wanted the officer who killed him to have a higher bail. I'm like, hell no, I don't want him to have a higher bail. Bail shouldn't be punishment. Bail shouldn't be a form of punishment. And honestly, if you raise people bail because you think the crime is ugly, it's our nephews and sons that are going to be the ones that can't afford bail, because bail is now $10 million. Right.
That's the hardest part. The hardest part is dealing with the families of victims. Because these are the people who I care most about having this conversation with. I don't really would have had a conversation with somebody who lives online and never been through nothing ever. Not saying their opinion doesn't matter, but it hit different when they put a bullet in your son. It's a different conversation, and it's not really the same. But maintaining that moral consistency is it's hard. It is hard. It's not
hard as hell. It's hard as hell. If somebody did something to one of my kids right now, I probably would feel the same way. Shit, you cut me off on the road, I might want to, you know what I mean, on the wrong day on the highway, I might believe in death penalty. You know what I'm saying? Like, but I don't feel like I am in my best position to make moral judgments when something has happened to me personally. I don't feel like I don't think we should make public policy from a place of personal outrage or pain or trauma or rage, right? Like, that ain't the move.
We're in a space right now where people feel like, you know, and I'm in Baltimore, and I remember when I would have conversations about Black Lives Matter, and people were like, well, what are you talking? I never heard of that. And then I'm like, yo, you have a Twitter? And they're like, no. And then I remember when people started hearing about Black Lives Matter after George Floyd died, and they got familiar, and they picked the books up, and they picked up, you know, books you've written 4 or 5 years ago, books I've written 5 years ago, like they, you know, and they educated themselves, and they went to marches. And then now we're getting into this place where Black Lives Matter blew up and became this big multi-million-dollar conglomerate. and the news cycle and stories that are constantly coming out every time they pop up in the media, it's not about any of the advocacy work. It's not about changing systems. It's about who has a mansion and who did this and who did that. What do you think is the future for not just that particular movement, but people who are feeling lost as if that movement hasn't been what they thought it could actually be?
You know, I think we have to separate organizations and movements.
Okay.
Because some of the controversy that is surrounding the Black Lives Matter global organization or global movement, you know, as the organization is somewhat different than the broader movement for Black lives, right? Which is hundreds of organizations around the country that do work. And we could even go more broad than that and just talk about a broader freedom movement in this country. I tell the young people and the aspiring activists and the people and my peers, et cetera, don't focus on an organization. You know, I don't know what's going on with BLM, so I can't speak to that. I can't speak to that. But I just don't know. But you know, and they can speak for themselves, and people can make their own judgments about it. You know what I mean? I've interviewed Patrice, who's a friend of my sister, my comrade, and you know, I've allowed her voice to speak. You know, Alicia can speak. You know, Opal can speak. You know, some of the other people connected to organizations like Melina can speak. You know, I let them do their speaking for themselves. I'm not affiliated with the organization, but what I will say is that regardless of how you feel about that organization, we cannot allow the media to use a particular case to obscure a freedom movement that for the last decade almost now has picked up the baton and had a sustained fight against police brutality, against police terrorism, against state violence. We've had an abolition movement that has moved from the margins to the center of public conversations. People are talking about defunding. They're talking about abolition. They're talking about all of these things, disarming. They're talking about all of the things that we've been wanting since critical resistance and before in the 90s. So, you know, Black trans women are still incredibly vulnerable, incredibly marginalized and erased. At the same time, we're having more conversations about Black trans lives than we ever have before in our movements. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think it's easy to say, well, there's controversy here, there's this person there, but I think that ain't the point. To me, the bigger point is, against the backdrop of the movement's messiness and complications and contradictions and tensions and battles, which every movement in every era has had, we're winning. We're fucking winning. Mm-hmm. Prisons are closing. We're developing more humane policies. It's not a clean victory. It ain't it ain't the Brooklyn Nets. But the net is a gain, and that has to matter to us.
Yeah, I think that it's also like, how are we talking about those wins, right? How are we promoting and talking about the positive things to kind of push back against the negative things? Because the negative things are always going to have legs. The negative things don't need a PR team. They're going to do PR for themselves, and they're going to work their way across everything. And I think a lot of times, and the reason why I knew you would have the correct insight on that, because I come in contact with a whole lot of young people who want to be inspired. They want to be inspired, and the way the internet is set up, and the way these stories are set up, and the way how these movements look, which is a lot of times no fault of their own, because movements have their own haters. They don't feel inspired, and they don't feel like they want to connect. We need to connect more than ever.
We need to connect more than ever. We need to celebrate our victories. We need to point out our growth, and we need to remind the world that we didn't just survive, but we've thrived, man. And that's what our work is about. That has to be part of the project, right? Is, protesting, advocacy, but also saying, yo, we did it. Yo, we made it. We won.
So what are some of the main things, the main hard points that you want people to take away from Seen Unseen?
That the struggle for justice is never neat and clean. Is always advancement and retrenchment, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But along the way, the powerful have been held accountable by the people catching hell. And media and technology has been a big part of how we've done it. That the use of technology is moving faster and changing the game and making things better and faster. But this ain't new. We come from a long tradition of Black folk that have used everything at their disposal to tell the truth and to fight for freedom.
Tell everyone where they can get the book.
They can get it anywhere that books are sold. But if you want to go to a bookstore where the owner ain't all up in the videos, go to Uncle Bobby's Coffee and Books. Support independent Black bookstores, yo. And I love my brother D. Watkins because he does his book events. He could go to the famous, white bookstores, but he comes to Uncle Bobby's. He supports Black business. He lives in a Black city. He got a Black family. He writes to Black people. That's why I love you, my brother, and that's why I'm grateful for you, man.
Hey, man, I'll see you soon, man. I'll be in Philly soon, man. Congratulations on everything.
Yeah, you too, my brother. I appreciate it, man. Looking forward to seeing you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I got a book coming out May 17th. That's why I know they probably gonna be reaching out, because I got
say less.
Yeah, I got a book coming out May 17th on masculinity.
Perfect. Say less. We got you.
Hey, well, congratulations. This is beautiful, man. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
Have a blessed one.
You too. Peace.